I like to think of shorebirds and seabirds, again, that are birds that rely on coastal habitats. So they can't go anywhere else. They can't nest in your backyard. They can't find a nice, gravel parking lot at a shopping mall and nest there. They need the coast. They need the ocean. And that's really what makes them unique, is when those habitats start to change, or we just wish they'd go somewhere else and make it easier if they would just nest inland. They simply can't. Ridgevale Beach is a beautiful beach in the town of Chatham where we have nesting piping plovers, we've had terns on some years, and that beach is a great example of really constant habitat change. There's sort of a dune island in the middle of the beach that's getting smaller and smaller over time. So it used to provide more coverage for young plovers, and we see it shrinking, and with it the plover habitat is shrinking as well. We're seeing more overwash on that beach, which means that water comes all the way over from Nantucket Sound through to the marsh, and that again is potentially creating a negative impact on nesting plovers. Can wash out their eggs. It builds nice habitat for them before they get there. I mean, it opens it up, but it's very low lying, and so we're seeing a lot of those patterns on that side of Ridgevale. We'll also note that in the other sort of area of Ridgevale towards Cockle Cove, there's very, very dense vegetation growth that's sort of precluding the birds from nesting up in the dunes. They don't have a lot of space. And so you can actually see the way that the ocean has come in, reduced habitat. The birds are still doing relatively well there, but we're seeing patterns there that we're seeing everywhere else, which is erosion. We're seeing areas both at the same time, loss of habitat, really dense vegetation growth. So the place for birds to nest becomes smaller and smaller and smaller over time. There are a lot of things about piping plovers that I think are really amazing. One of them being that resilience. So they're returning to the same site that they nest at every year. They're site faithful. They're coming back, and that alone is pretty remarkable when you think about the fact they're coming from the Bahamas. They're honing into the spot that they came to before, and they're going to try again. They'll re-nest up to 5 times if their nest fails. So again, they're determined. They want to raise their families on our beach and contribute to that adult population. They are so incredibly protective of their young that they will pretend to be injured to draw predators away from nests. They will perform this elaborate broken wing display on the beach, saying, perhaps like most parents would, take me, right? Take me, leave the chicks alone, leave the nest alone, take me instead. Them, along with these terns, are very dedicated to keeping their chicks protected from predators. They can all stuff up all of their chicks up underneath them. If there's a threat, if there's scary weather, that's called brooding. So oftentimes you'll hear an adult call to the chicks, and all of them will fluff up underneath it, and all of a sudden the adult has, 16 legs to protect the chicks. It's very, very adorable. They are leading their chicks through these places filled with threats, right? Filled with predators, filled with people, with activity, with dogs, and they are, in my perhaps anthropomorphizing mind, brave enough to bring their chicks down to the water, continue to feed them, or continue to support them feeding. Actually, chicks feed themselves, which is another remarkable thing about piping plovers. When they hatch, they can immediately walk half a mile. They are on the move. They run down to the water and feed themselves. They're precocial, so they're not like songbirds. They're not getting fed by their parents. They are out there in the world. They're like little hungry toddlers, and they go from being fluffy cotton balls in 25, 35 days to full-blown adults that are going to fly all the way down to the Bahamas. So it's a really intense time period where the adults do not stop. I see them hanging tight on that nest, waiting for it to hatch in the busiest beaches that we have. So it's really a story of dedication in a lot of ways, and I think that one reason we see piping plovers as so charismatic is that they spend a lot of time on the ground. They're not flying away from us, they're not difficult to see, they're right there with us, and we can recognize a lot of the behaviors that we have, protective behaviors for our own little families in piping plovers, and that's pretty remarkable to me. There are a couple concerns with piping plovers and climate change. The first one, habitat loss, right? We are seeing incredible amounts of erosion. We're seeing higher storm surges, higher tides, sea level rise, more storms. So if we're looking at loss of habitat, they will have nowhere to go. They nest on open beach. They don't nest sort of up in the dunes. When the beach is eroded, they need to be down on the beach really where you want to put your beach blanket. So losing that habitat is a huge concern. Another concern is overwash during the nesting season. And overwash is when water comes up into an area and washes out nests and really pulls them out to sea. So we might have hundreds and hundreds of nests nearly ready to hatch, and then a freak storm comes through and washes out all of those eggs, resetting the birds to step one of their nesting season. Sometimes it's too late for them to re-nest. Sometimes the season is a wash. So again, that can really take down their productivity, and we see more overwash when there's, again, storms, high tides, heavy wind. When we start to see changes in the environment, we need to be really, really careful about protection. We need to optimize protection when we have the window and really take great data. I think that's the stage we're at now, is we need to know when the first bird shows up. When does it start engaging in courtship and nesting behavior? When is the last young fledged? What are the big impacts? So that we can do better protecting them. And to us, knowledge is power. It sounds simple, it sounds maybe a little bit silly, but if we can pick up on, again, on those patterns and say, wow, it feels a little early for them to be showing up, this feels early for a nest, that's really important information. This past year, we had around 25% loss of piping plover eggs to overwash, which is when like big tides come up and wash out all the eggs. Last year was the same, so 2022, 2023 were similar. We've had some years where it's a little bit higher, so it's something we're keeping an eye on, because if that trend really starts to rocket, again, those alarm bells go off of these birds aren't having a chance to nest successfully. Another concern that I'll bring up is prey availability. We don't know a lot about it yet, but what does it mean that southern states with piping plovers are doing really poorly? Does that mean that prey is changing over time with changing ocean temperatures? Does it mean that the prey base will change here in Massachusetts? Because right now the birds are doing relatively well, but we have a lot of questions about why. We can deduce some of it. We do a lot of really great work, and we have a lot of dedicated organizations in Massachusetts doing this work, but there's got to be something else going on, and so we need to understand how prey might change. Species that are on the endangered species list are, at risk still. So the really rough definitions of those is that it's possible that they could be extirpated. It's possible that their population will turn very quickly and drop. We're seeing some very concerning drops for piping plovers in other states. Massachusetts is one of the only places that they're doing well. Doesn't mean things can't change super, super quickly. When we lose a species, that has an impact, right? It has an impact on the whole ecosystem. And it could be the smallest species, could be an insect, could be a bird, could be a large predator. That's not something we want. Really, we want to support all the different parts of the ecosystem. And so that's worst case scenario for really any of the species that Mass Audubon focuses on. From Mass Audubon's perspective, this would be a human-driven event, and that's very different than the dinosaurs, right? And that's a question we get a lot. Well, dinosaurs, couldn't hack it, they became extinct, who cares, this is something that is gonna happen, right? But that wasn't humans out there having an impact, and it's a really sad story when we see birds like the passenger pigeon or other really remarkable birds. There used to be so many of them that the sky was dark, were out hunted and destroyed by humans. And we've had a massive impact on birds that rely on our coasts. The coast became a really popular destination to go to. Development was widespread, driving on the beach. We all have our beloved pets on the beach, and all of these things contributed to the loss of what is an incredibly resilient species. From our perspective, protecting biodiversity is one of Mass Audubon's highest priorities, and so our belief is that we can share the beach. We've seen time and time again that piping plovers and humans can thrive alongside each other. There can be space for people, there's space for birds. I think right now we're taking a couple approaches that make a lot of sense. One is that we're championing coastal restoration, really. So we're looking at opportunities to do green restoration of coastal sites where shorebirds need those habitats to feed. We're also doing a really great job protecting the birds while they're doing well here in Massachusetts. We have an outsized responsibility for a lot of the species that we protect. For example, more than half the Atlantic coast population of piping plovers relies on Massachusetts to breed. So the more we can do a great job protecting those birds, the hope is that we're gathering data and we're taking really good care of them in this moment right now so that we can be prepared and be resilient for when things really start to change.